Good morning, everyone. I am trying to make sure I am live. It says I am live. Uh, hey, Susan sees me, so I'm gonna go with she. It's working. Yay, working. Um, Welcome to Software Club for August. This month we're gonna be looking at playing with stitches, specifically the new, some of them. Some of them are going to be the new stitches that have been added with our software. So there is a little over 100 new pattern runs, which means that the Designer Plus level, which a lot of you have, has 613 stitch patterns. The Creator level has 382. Random things. I was super excited to learn that. But anyways, let's go ahead and get started. So when I get a chance, I will be making CDs, and that will have the handout I'm going to follow, a copy of this presentation, some reference files, and then the files needed for doing the exercise. Yes, I do not have my webcam on. After moving all of my stuff out of the store, my sewing room has gotten very, very full. And it's very, very messy, and I don't want to show it. And I can't figure out how to blur my background. So what we're going to look at today, what we're going to learn, how they have improved version 9 pattern stitches. We're going to talk about how to use pattern stitches, some places to get inspiration, how we can alter them for heavier thread, although we're just touching on that. And then our exercises are how to import stitches from your sewing machine, how you can create a multicolored pattern, and then how you can use the branching tool to correct certain patterns. So, improvements in version 9. There are new categories. That's first time improvement. So we now have a banner category, Children 2, Decoration, Hobby and Sport, Nature 2, and Seasons. And in this lesson, she has included a folder that has all the new stitches so you can sew out reference files. So these are the different hoopings. So we have our banner, which is one hooping. We have a couple different ones for Children 2. I did not realize we got a kangaroo. The kangaroo is super adorable. In my personal opinion, any of the really complex stitches, like this one at the top, which I think is a train. I'm going to go with it's a train. It will stitch out more accurately on the on the embroidery machine than the sewing machine. Then we have our decoration ones. Some of these are quite large. Hobby and Sport, so we now have a sewing machine stitch. Nature 2 and Seasons, so there's 2 panels of Nature 2. We now have some fun palm trees. And then Seasons, we have some like candy canes. Little bats. Super cute. Something that's different with version 9 versus version 8 is version 9 will add or subtract one pattern to make things meet. So if we look at the bottom left corner on the left one, which was made with version 9, the patterns meet fairly well. Is it perfect? No. Would most people not probably notice that it's not perfect? Yes. With version 8, it was super not perfect. And actually it was to the point that with version 8, I would most likely use an open object tool so that I could be more exact in how I wanted my pattern runs to meet, because I can be very picky. There are also now new options for creating patterns. We have choices. So usually whenever we are in previous versions like version 8, the choices we had are what folder are we putting it in and what is its name for the pattern. Now we have the option to either remove or keep color changes. So if we have a design that has multiple colors, you can actually keep all those color changes. Most of the time you're going to want that checked. You're not going to necessarily want color changes. And then we also have remove other functions. So if you have some specialty things applied to it, you can keep them or remove them. If they're both checked, then we are using it like we would use it in version 8. So let's look at some specifics. What we can do with patterns. Well, we can fill an object with patterns. We can do an outline with patterns. We can do pattern stamps. We can get distracted by YouTube. We can see that my just having lots of error messages. That's fun. Well, I'm going to keep going and hope that it decides to fix itself. I don't know how to fix my internet and why it's being special and why it just now decided to do that. Okay, so we can fill things in with patterns. We can do alternating patterns where you have two different patterns that go back and forth. We can do an outline with patterns. We can do pattern stamps where we just do one at a time. And we can also do carving stamps, which is kind of like the opposite. It forces needle penetrations to create a pattern. So in object properties, there's a lot of things we can choose and change. We can choose what pattern we want to use. We can choose the size of the pattern. We can change our column and row spacing. We can change an offset. We can change the angle. We can do alternating patterns where you use two patterns and they go back and forth. We can get distracted by our Wi-Fi. And all of these in the object properties are numbers based. And so you can use math to try and figure out what you want. However, if you are a visual person, you can also do a visual way of editing. And so we got there. Actually, I'm going to go back a slide. If you click on layout down here, if we click on layout, then we have options. We get a sea, or what feels like a sea of yellow patterns, and then there are 3 blue patterns. And with those, the middle guide, which is the one that's actually currently selected, is what I think of as the crux of the L. It allows you to move the patterns, rotate them, skew them. I think of that as italicizing, or scale them. The top one, which is the top of the L, controls row spacing and row offset. You can also scale with it, so you can change size. And the side one changes your column spacing, and you can also resize it. So this is a way to visually change how the pattern is going to look. And sometimes you can't do everything with math. It's hard to say that because I love doing things with math, and visually is the way to go. And that was for pattern fills. If we're doing just a pattern outline, we have very few things we can change. We can change what pattern we're using and then the size and the spacing. But you can edit patterns. So this is a pattern run, and you can do it visually through reshape. And there's a lot of things you can do. So, oh dear, Mr. Mouse, just moving through that PowerPoint too fast. So with this, this is a diagram from the manual, and the pink diamonds you can drag to move individual patterns. You can scale with the gray triangles that point outwards. You can change the baseline, orientation, and length. There's a lot of things you can do And then when you click on a pattern, you get even more things you can change. So these are all different ways you can change this pattern. We can also import stitches from our machine. So if there's a stitch you really like on your sewing machine and it's not in the embroidery software, you can pull it from most, but not all, for most machines, you can pull it from the machine, put it on a USB stick, and then import it into your software. And then depending on your machine, a lot of times you can go the other way as well, where you are taking a stitch from the software and importing it into the sewing machine. We're not going to really talk about that today, but it is something you can do. You can also create your own pattern. So Debbie has a pattern set or pattern folder called Custom Patterns with different ones she has made in the past. When you create a pattern, okay, that's just weird. Sorry. I went from, I don't like you, the software is like, the streaming's like, I don't like you, to, oh, we know you're good now. And I don't know what changed in 5 minutes. Whatever. We're just gonna keep going. So when you create a pattern, you have to set a reference line. The reference line determines the orientation and the spacing for your pattern. And a lot of times you want the reference line to go with starts and stops, because that will decrease your number of jump stitches. Because personally, when I am stitching a pattern fill, the ideal number of jump stitches is 0. I don't want to deal with jump stitches. But you can see with the little smiley faces, depending on how you set the reference line, which is just done with 2 clicks, it changes the points that you manipulate it with. You can create multiple pattern runs. It's a little bit more involved. So you can either do it on the sewing machine and then send it to the software, if you have, because most sewing machines do have combination mode. But you could also, which is what I would do because I don't have a sewing machine. No, I don't have a sewing machine in my sewing room. My sewing machine lives in the living room. And my computer lives in my sewing room. So the laziness inside of me says I don't want to walk back and forth. But you can use just the embroidery software and use Pattern Stamp to combine 2 patterns to be used as one, which is what I would normally do because I like to use my software. As a random aside, I do have a machine in my sewing room. It's just an embroidery only machine, so it has no decorative stitches. So some of our creative effects, we can use the wave effect or 3D globe. So wave changes like the stitch angle, like there's an arc here in the middle, and the ones further inside the arc get smaller and the ones outside the arc get larger, but still following that arc. 3D globe effect, the center patterns are larger and then they go smaller to make it kind of look like it's popping out at you. We have alternating pattern, where the patterns alternate. And then you can apply a 3D globe effect to that. You can also create some unusual backgrounds. So this one was created by making a stipple-filled square. She changed some of the properties. She broke it apart so it didn't see it as a stipple fill anymore. It just saw it as a line going around. And then she applied this pattern run. She has already had her, Debbie's already had the lesson, the streamed lesson for this month. And she said that this would possibly be really good for curly hair if you're trying to get that texture. With pattern runs, the direction you digitize makes a difference with some patterns, but not all. On the scallop, the reference mark or reference line is from tip to tip. And so it's not in the middle, it's tip to tip. So if you go clockwise, the scallop goes one direction. If you digitize counterclockwise, the scallop goes the other direction. And you can't use the mirror tool to correct it because it's going to mirror the whole shape. It won't mirror the pattern. Um, Another random thing is if you apply a pattern run to an object and then you change the size of the object, the number of patterns within the object do not change. So if it is best practices to create your shape, make it the size you want, and then apply a pattern run. You can make some satin stitch fill patterns. The difference that we're showing here is version 8 doing the exact same steps in version 8 versus version 9, except with version 9 we use the branching effect. So with this particular lesson does not work with version 8 at all, because the underlay gets stuck on top every other one. It's kind of weird. Now, could you possibly want that effect? Possibly, but probably not. There are reference files. These are the print. You can print these out. This is part of the manual, the reference manual. This is Appendix E, and it will just show you all the different pattern sets. If you want to try heavier thread, you want to increase your stitch length for pattern runs, you want to use a different needle size, you want to ideally lower the speed of your machine, and if it's a filled pattern, you want to reduce your density by increasing stitch spacing. So in this case, we have the scallop pattern, and we actually need to create a new pattern. So we're going to stamp one of the scallops and then change the stitch length so that it is a longer stitch length. So inspiration. It's always good to have some inspiration. So Google has lots of inspirations for things you can do with decorative stitching. And it's all sorts of things for making a sample, almost like, I think that's probably a crazy quilt type thing. But making salvage projects. This is like a little snowman with lots of decorative stitching. Pinterest has a lot of decorative stitching ideas. We All Sew, which is the Bernina of America blog, has a lot of ideas. And a lot of these are sewing based, but just because they're sewing based doesn't mean we couldn't do it in our embroidery machine. Especially if I look at these little ornaments, that could totally be an In the Hoop project. Could totally see that. Some of these bags just have fun decorative stitches on them. We All Sew has a lot. And then stitch recipes. Oh, I love stitch recipes. So stitch recipes is where you have usually three or more stitches that are sewn in a particular order to create a band overall design that looks really cool. And if you want to see more, this is where we have a new big book. Excuse me. There we go. Big book of stitches. I do have it with me, but as I said, my webcam won't blur the background, and my room is very, very messy. So if you want to see the big book of stitches, I recommend you go to the store because we do have it in stock. But it talks about how to use your decorative stitches, how you can use them, all sorts of fun things like that. It also has a stitch recipe gallery where it's like, this is what this looks like. These are the stitches we used. This is the one we started with, because you start in the center and go out if you're doing it on your sewing machine. If you're doing it on your embroidery machine, it doesn't matter as much. But you can create some really cool bands designs with these. But I definitely recommend the Big Book of Stitches. Because I know my mom is never going to watch this, She's getting it for her birthday, which is one reason I have it next to me, because I need to wrap it because we're celebrating her birthday tomorrow. Anyways, stitch recipes. I love these. There are a lot of them. And then you can look online for more. Advertisements. So sometimes it feels like what they show us is very crafty focused, like stuff that you would expect to see someone has handmade. It's always nice to see something that is being produced commercially, that has the same idea, and be like, hey, that isn't just what I can do at home. It's what someone has decided will sell and sell well. I think these are little wallets that they've basically quilted the vinyl with little hearts, which is super sweet. There's also some decorative stitch books, such as Stupendous Stitching. Not one we have in stock, I don't believe. But you can kind of get an idea of what they're thinking of here. So, if you ever have questions, type them in the chat. But we are going to get on to the lesson. Or on to the practical part of the lesson once I figure out where I put my iPad. Because it tells me what I'm supposed to be doing. So it's going to be just a second. I did not get as prepared as I should have this morning. Also, it feels like a toddler has touched my iPad because it feels a wee bit sticky. And that makes it not behave as well as it should. Or it's just trying to convince me that I need a new iPad, which is not happening. This one's good. Even when sometimes it's a little bit slow. Or maybe it's just not going to want to do what I want. Okay, so let's go over how we can import a stitch from an embroidery machine. And it's one of those things that works on most embroidery machines, but not all. Or not most sewing machines. If you have a sewing machine that's also an embroidery machine, you will most likely be able to import stitches out of it. If you have an embroidery only machine, you have no decorative stitches. So I am on the 880 simulator. So the disclaimer is, if there's a stitch you love and you know it's on a different machine and it's not on your machine, and it's a Bernina machine, there's a simulator for it and you can get the stitch. But I'm not telling you that because that probably is something I'm not supposed to tell you. But anyways, on my screen, I'm going to find my decorative stitch. So I'm going to follow her lead on this, although you can choose anything you want, but I'm going to go into the 501 folder, which is multi-directional stitches. And then I can choose a stitch, which we're just going to choose 501. So now I have this and I want to save it. To save it, I'm going to go into my personal memory icon, which is the heart. I would click, and obviously I've saved lots of stitches here, to open. On other machines, let me see if I can find I think the 480 does it. Oh, hey, I haven't opened this one before. English. What do we want to do today? Let's say I want this little elephant. Sometimes it does not open fully. You have to hit the little icon here so that you can find the USB stick. If you have it fully open to your screen and you don't have a USB stick, you do not have the ability to export stitches. Okay, but anyways, once we go to the USB stick, we can either click on the stitch or hit the check mark, and it is saved to your USB stick. Ideally, you would have a USB stick plugged into your sewing machine. On the simulator, however, I then have to go to my start menu, the folder for my simulator, so the 880 folder, the USB stick folder, and it's not going to show me the right thing. I'm going to have to go up to, or click where it says Bernina 880, and I want the Sew PC card. And this will have my stitch. And I'm going to have to do view and then extra large icon so I can see what they are. And then what I like to do is I will rename it. So I'm going to right click on it, rename. This is something you don't have to do on, well, you kind of still have to do it on the sewing machine because it's still going to name it this weird number. Name it 880 plus 501 so I know what stitch number it is. I am going to remove color changes and other functions. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And then for my reference line, I'm going to click at the start point. Hold the control key down because I actually know it's straight. And then click at the end point, and I have now created my stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK, and then delete my stitch because it's permanently saved in this install of my software. To use that stitch, I can use my ellipse tool and create a circle. So center, click in the center, click on the outside edge, enter for a circle, escape to turn off the ellipse tool. Select my circle, and I want it to have, actually I want to resize it first. So I want my circle to be 7.3. And then I'm going to hit 0 so I can see all of it. Then I am going to go to a pattern run outline. I'm actually going to right click on it, select my pattern set, which is going to be Rachel's pattern set. Choose the one I want, say OK with, again, my pattern, and it should be going the opposite direction. So instead of redigitizing, which is actually what I normally do, you can go to a straight stitch, mirror image it, and then whenever you apply a pattern run, it'll be going the opposite direction. And if I was going to save this file, it'd be importing a stitch from the machine. Okay, so let's look at creating a embroidery design with a multicolored pattern. So I'm going to do a new blank design. I'm going to insert embroidery. And I'm going to take this away so I can go to a specific place. Okay, so in our student file, we have files for class, and we want the wreath border, which if I pop this over, we can see is a little holly with 2 berries, and we're going to open it. I'm going to zoom in so I can see better. And we want to go ahead and activate our grid. The grid is handy because then we can make sure things are going the way we want. And what we want to do is we want to move this so the it's following the grid. So I'm going to put, this is the way I want to do it. I'm going to line that point where I want it. I'm going to click, so I'm in rotation, and I'm going to set my rotation mark at that edge. So now when I rotate, that stays where I want it to be, and I can move this outline so that is perfectly across. Every time I've done it differently, I've had to try multiple times. I'm going to click off. I'm going to hold down my Alt key so I can select something in a group set. and select the green leaf, and we're going to make it a satin fill instead of a step fill. And we're going to go to reshape, and we're going to change our stitch angle so it's exactly 90. It was fairly close to 90, but we're going to be exact. I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and select the berry. And then I'm going to move the berry so it touches the other berry. Yeah. So it's going to be kind of on top. So I'm going to move that so it's about centered. I'm going to hold the Alt key, select the other one, and move it so it's about centered. And then I'm going to hold, I already have one berry selected. I'm going to hold Alt and Control and have both berries. And the Edit Toolbox, I'm going to click on Apply Closest Join, because that will reduce my jump stitch. So Apply Closest Join changes my start and end points to reduce jump stitches. So we want to use our pattern to create a frame that is approximately 4 by 6. And we can do this a couple ways. So if we're going to do a 4 by 6 frame and we want 5 repeats, we can divide the 4 inches by the number of repeats we want. And if the pattern is 0.8 inches long, the ends of the patterns will just touch and there'll be no jump stitches. If we divide 6 by 0.08, it will take 7.5 repeats to create the vertical side without jump stitches. So at that point, you can either go bigger or smaller. We're going to go bigger and do 8 repeats. So our sides are going to be 6.4 inches long. And then you can play with compromise. And you can read all this in the handout whenever I get the CDs made. But in essence, we're going to compromise and make it a stitch length or a length of 0.66. So I'm going to select everything and change my width with proportional scaling locked to 0.66. Then hit enter. And then with the pattern still selected, although I'm going to be special, it doesn't say to do this. We don't have to do it. It makes me happier. I am going to go to auto start and end and say first stitch and last stitch because it gets rid of that jump stitch. And the jump stitch really annoys me sometimes. But with it selected, we are going to create our pattern. So settings, create pattern. I'm going to keep putting it under my pattern set named Rachel's, but you can put it under whatever you want. And this is going to be holly with berries. We're going to uncheck remove color changes because we want our 2 colors. We're going to go ahead and say OK. And then for my reference line, I'm going to click on the bottom black dot. I'm going to hold the control key down and click on I clicked on the bottom left. Now I'm going to click on the bottom right. And that is my reference line. I'm going to say OK to that dialog box. It's like, hey, you made it. And then I'm going to delete this stitch because I already saved it to my software. So now I'm ready to make my my frame. So I'm going to select the single outline stitch. I'm going to go to the digitize toolbox, select the rectangle tool, and I am going to click and click. So now I have a rectangle. Escape to turn off the rectangle tool. Select my rectangle, and I want my width to be 4 inches and my height to be 6. And I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to hit 0 so you can actually see it. I'm also going to turn my grid off because I think it makes it easier. Then with it selected, we're going to go to the pattern run outline, I'm going to right click on it. Next to heirloom, select. I'm going to turn on true view so I can see what's going on. I'm going to go to the Rachel's pattern, select holly with berries. I'm going to say okay and apply. And it doesn't quite match. Like, it should match fairly well, and it obviously on the bottom left does not match. I'm going to go ahead and say okay out of here. But what I'm going to do is if I look up here to my width and height, okay, undo, uncheck proportional scaling and make your 4x6. So what happened is I wasn't thinking I had proportional scaling locked, and so when I made my height 6, it changed my width to whatever it was supposed to be. Okay, let's try this again. I'm going to right click on pattern run. We are going to select our holly with berries. We are going to apply it. Oh look, it actually meets okay. It could actually meet a little bit better because like if we look down here, it doesn't quite meet. But also if we look up here, the width and height is not 4x6, it's 4.5 by 6.5. So we change that to 4x6. It is going to meet basically perfectly. So we're gonna, if you want to save this, this would be saved as holly frame. Now, there's a wee bit of a problem when we go to stitch this. And we probably have a button on our machine that will take care of it, but right now, problem. And that is we're stitching green, then red, then green, then red, then green, then red. No one wants to do that. Normally, I would say to go to design and optimize color changes. And apparently there's 59 color changes, which is a lot. And it says it's going to go to 0, which makes no sense. And if we say okay, it does nothing. It did not combine the colors. To fix this, or the next thing I would be like, well, can I ungroup it? If I right click, I cannot ungroup. If I can't ungroup, usually I want to break apart. Can't break it apart. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make it into a stitch file, because then the software won't see it as, okay, I actually do have to save this. So save as, so this is holly frame. So we're going to export it. So file, export machine file. Holly frame, we're going to export it as an EXP file and save it. I'm going to X out of this holly frame and then do a new blank design. Insert embroidery. And we have to go to where we saved it. So mine is in my machine files. I'll be holly frame. Open it. And unfortunately, even if I go to design and optimize color changes, it's not supposed to work. It said it wasn't supposed to work. Apparently it works. Huh. The things you learn. It's not supposed to work, but it worked. I'm going to hit undo because we're going to go over how we're supposed to fix it. So I'm going to right click in my color film and ungroup everything, and then how she wants us to fix it. Select the second green and you go down selecting all the greens and then click and drag them, and I'm not selecting all of them, so they're all in a row. However, if optimize thread colors works, that's what I want to do. I want to optimize my thread colors. Was it supposed to work? No. Is it working? Yes. I'm going with it. And it's just showing you jump stitches. It's not actually, or it should not actually stitch these straight lines. It's like, hey, this is a jump stitch. Just wanted you to know. So, if you want to stitch it, this would be called color optimized holly frame. So let's look at making our flower, because that's the last one. So I'm going to do a new blank design, insert artwork, We want to be in the artwork folder and then find our JPEG folder. And we're looking for 8 East 005. We're going to open it. And I'm going to zoom in because we want to digitize this flower. And I have my own opinion about how I would digitize it, which is using the magic wand tools because they work really well. Because this used to be a magic wand tool lesson. But we are supposed to use the block tool. So we're going to select the block tool and zoom way in on one of these petals. And how the block tool works is you make little boxes. So I'm going to click on one side, click on the other, and then I'm going to start doing rights. Right click, 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 right click. And those lines that go through the petal are my stitch angles. And then left hand to left, and then enter. And then I'm going to hit escape to turn off my block tool. Apparently I was also supposed to have this already set as a satin fill. And we want to choose a different color. I'm going to make mine bright pink because I can. With my petal selected, I'm going to zoom out because I don't want to do my other petals. I have a tool for that, and it's called the Mirror Merge tool. So I'm going to use the wreath and the Mirror Merge toolbox, and I should have a thing that pops up asking me how many repeats. I want 5. And please use the drop down, don't type it in. Oh wait, escape. So that line is telling me that I did this, I started wrong. So if I zoom in here, I have like this little cross going on. I don't want it to be crossed. I'm not sure how I got it crossed. But if you have a cross in the block digitizing tool, it will usually look like an hourglass. Because it was the first one, it didn't really look like it. Okay, back, wreathing. And we're not going to really follow exactly where it says. Instead, we're just going to make it where our petals barely touch. And if you want to be special, you can hold the control key down. If we want to merge, no, we do not want to merge. So I have my flower. Now we want a flower center. To get a flower center, we're going to go to the digitize toolbox, the ellipse tool. We want a satin fill. We want the color we used before. And this is the fun part because I can't look at the background. I want to find basically the center of my petals. Click. Drag outwards so it just touches all my petals. Click. And then enter. And I'm going to hit escape because I just want one. And then I can select it and use my arrow keys to fine tune it actually being in the center. Okay, so I have my flower. I'm going to turn my picture off and then hit 0 so you can see it. I need to play with my underlay because right now, if it stitches, it's going to do the zigzag underlay. And whenever you make things smaller, because we're not staying at this size, you still want underlay usually, but you want less underlay. So I'm going to hit stop. I'm going to select everything by just clicking on the pink color chip in the color film. We're going to go to effects. Effects is the gear icon at the top. And we have underlay 1 checked, which is fine, except instead of a step, we want an edge walk. And we're going to go ahead and say okay. And now, when we stitch it out, it's just going to go, like, outline the design, basically. And then put the satin stitching on top. And it's just going to go all the way around. I'm going to hit escape. And we're going to go ahead. Did we resize this at some point? Oh, hey. Guess who's bad at reading instructions? Okay, so I'm going to grab my image and I'm going to make the width of my image. I'm going to lock my proportional scaling. The width is supposed to be an inch. So my flower is quite a bit bigger than it is supposed to be. So I'm going to kind of center it and use the shift key to resize it down. That looks pretty good. Okay. Okay, it's that thing. Okay, let's change our auto start and end. First stitch, last stitch. Okay, the little line. There's a little line there. It was bugging me. I wanted it to go away. Okay, so here's the size the pattern's actually supposed to be. Let's do things the way we're supposed to. And we are going to create this without doing anything else to it. So with it selected, I'm going to go to Settings, Create Pattern. And this is Floral Wreath is what she named it. Because we used the wreath tool. We're going to go ahead and say OK. And then we want to go from one side to the other. I like to actually use my resize handle points as reference lines. So I'm going to click on the left center and then click on the right center. And we have created the wreath. We are not actually going to delete our flower though, because we will be using it in just a second. I am going to delete the picture out the back. I'm going to do a new blank design. And we're going to right click on our pattern fill. Pattern. We're going to go to the one we just created, our floral wreath. We're going to say OK. And OK. And then we're going to use the rectangle tool. And we're just going to make a rectangle. And then realize that I hadn't changed settings from earlier. There we go. But I want you to be pink. So we have some issues. And this is what happens if you do it in version 8 as well. We have jump stitches. We have underlays going on. Like, no underlays on this row. Underlays on this row on top. Things aren't right. That's the basic thing. Things aren't right. And the underlays are on top because it's reversing the stitching order. So we're gonna come back to our original pattern. We're going to select everything, and I'm going to do that by clicking over in my color film because it's one color. We're going to go to the Edit toolbox and select Branching. And we're going to click on the we're going to click on the left side, and we're going to click on the right side. No, that doesn't look good. Undo. Let's read the instructions. Let's start on the left and then go right. Why do I have a jump stitch though? She didn't have a jump stitch. You know, it's always fun when things aren't going exactly like you want it to go. So we're going to ignore that there's a jump stitch in it. Don't know why there's a jump stitch. Hers does not show a jump stitch. I'm sure there is something I am doing wrong. Let's just go ahead and create this and do the same thing I did last time. Click, hold the control key down, click. If I go back in here, we can see how bad that one looks. I can actually just change it and say okay and apply. Oh, now it's not showing jump stitches. I don't know why it was showing jump. It's not showing them now. Okay, trust the process. But once we branch it, it works appropriately. And then, of course, you can grab this and be like, hey, I want you to be 3D globe effect. And actually, if I go into layout, I can be like, hey, I want you to actually be centered. If I hit enter, you can use the layout to fussy cut where those go. You can even apply a wave effect. Is that a good idea on this pattern? No, it's not. But I can do it. But yeah, there's lots of things you can do with this. Anyways, I know this has been a rocky stream with buffering, but let me know if there's any questions. If you want to work through these lessons with me, I will be having a Zoom class this afternoon. I think it starts at 1:30. I don't even know anymore. I've already worked 40 hours this week, so everything else is just like, hi, where's your brain? It's not here. That's what I can say. My brain is not here. Yes, it's at 1. So we will be having our hands-on class at 1. You can sign up for that on the BERNINA OKC website. But as for now, I don't see any questions in chat, so thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next month. Bye!